Sabah or whether it was in Nahda, under any circumstances, like the doctor just mentioned, it was imperative that this had to be done. We are a nation state. This is not a joke.
Yes.
And under any circumstances, I think the voice of 33 million people supported by their army and by their police came out and definitely were very clear on their point that we will not be ruled by a fascist international terrorist organization, no matter who it is backed by. So today, if we look at it, we are on our own, happily, in a sense. I've never felt so invigorated and more proud to be Egyptian than after the 30th of June, to be very specific.
Yes.
I see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There's a future that we're looking at. Every part of every person that plays a role, every government entity that has a part is doing it. They're doing it separately and they're doing it together. The army and the police are taking care of that part of the security.
Yes.
As a representative of the private sector, we too have a very major responsibility in the concept of security. Because as we grow and develop and start going back to, some kind of normality in the levels of business that we used to have pre-2011, we should be employing more people. And that on its own is a great fight for security. An employed person is less likely to be, standing in a place for 40 days. And this is a role that the private sector needs to be playing right now. So on our side, as the private sector representatives, we're doing this. We're trying as much as we possibly can to maintain the jobs that we already have and to create as many new jobs as we possibly can. In that sense, we feel that we are helping as much as we possibly can the security efforts of the army and the police. So this is by default something that had to happen, will continue to happen if people take over a bank or if they take over a city. I expect our police to be there.
Yes.
Our sincere condolences to everybody that lost their lives on that and many other
sad events.
Breakups, if you want to call them. But again, this is a period of time that I believe we're going to overcome it. And as we're doing that, we're now thinking about the economy. It's very important for us to focus our efforts as the private sector working with the public sector on how we can develop this economy. It is not just development, it is recovery. We need to recover our economy, we need to reform our economy, and then we need to look at the future in a completely different perspective. Is it that we want to go back to 2011 where we're doing 5% GDP growth, even in better days when we're doing 7% GDP growth? But we know that our potential is double digits. We know that we could be looking at 11 and 12%. We know that we could be looking at tourism reaching $50 billion instead of the 11 that we're getting or used to get our highest peak. And this is why we must change the way we approach things. Everybody knows how to solve the problem. Everybody talks about it in all of these talk shows, and we sit together and we talk and we talk, and at the end of the day, when you go down in the street, nothing is being done. So I know it's a very difficult task for the current government, very tough task for them, but at the same time, they have an opportunity to go into history as the government that really led the transition, not just economically, but politically in this country. So they've got a major responsibility upon their shoulders. I trust that they will be able to do it, not alone, but with the help of everyone. The private sector is volunteering all its services and all its efforts to the government and to the people in civil society at this point. A very small example, there was a cleanup that happened in certain areas, I think last week, that the private sector was involved in. Construction companies sent their cars and the loaders and their trucks and were able to clean up what hasn't been done in maybe 10 months by the public sector.
Yes.
It was finished in 3 to 4 days. Now that shouldn't be the norm. It shouldn't be how we run our country.
Yes.
on a basis of charity and social corporate responsibility.
Definitely.
But at this period of time, with the spirit, the national spirit that we have today, I think it is everybody's responsibility to be part of this effort and do what they can. So on our side as the private sector, we are pushing as hard as we possibly can to make as much impact as we can during this period of time.
Okay, there is good news here about tourism. We talked about security and how security is a priority in order for tourism and financial and economic development to thrive. It's said that up to 220 media and tourism figures arrived at Hurghada International Airport on Saturday. Head of the Egyptian firm for airports, Gadi Karim Nasser, said that amongst those visiting Hurghada was a Russian delegation that aims at probing the security situation as well as stability in the country. particularly in the Red Sea resorts of Hurghada and Sharm el-Sheikh. Nasser expressed hope that the tourism sector would be revived soon in the country. And we know also that starting from October that there will be German tourists groups coming to Egypt. What do you say about that? Would that help somehow in the economy regarding that, like the very difficult situation that we're trying to get out of from?
In my opinion, I see the four top priority objectives to the transition government after number one is the security, as we mentioned.
Of course, yes.
Number two, to decrease unemployment.
Mm-hmm.
We will talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Number three, in my opinion, is to really apply the social justice.
Yes.
And number four, it will be the controlling the inflation. So will come to the points when we talk about the new decisions about salaries or wages and so on. You talk about tourism.
Yes.
A few years ago, Egypt used to enjoy a revenue over 13 billion US dollar. Let's say the cost of the same amount, the equivalent cost for this, between 5 to 6 billion. So you have a profit to this business almost over 6 billion US dollar. Right now, the revenue is less than 5 billion. Okay, and the cost is more than 6 billion. So you can see the picture. Where is the picture? If you compare it to a country like Spain or even Turkey, you will find that they have a revenue from tourism reached almost 25 billion US dollar right now. We can reach that figure very easily. What we should do, we have all the infrastructure in the tourist business. The private sector, if we talk about, private sectors are really the one is monopolizing the business of tourism.
Yes.
All the infrastructure are there. So what we need? Security, nothing more. You are happy because we have yesterday 1,200 tourism. I think we should have 1,200 tourists every hour. We should have over 25 or 30 million tourists per year. That's the capability of Egypt. That's the size of Egypt. And if we do that, everybody will be happy. There are less unemployment. There are a lot of establishment of new positions and new business, new industry, and because tourism, depending on a lot of other industries, it's not just tourism.
Yes.
So this is a sector. I read a report like 40 years ago, and at that time, Sinai was occupied by Israel, and that report written by the United Nations. And that report mentioned that Sinai itself can have a revenue to cover all the need Egypt has without any additional resources. So if we really focus in tourism, just tourism, we can do it. We can play it. And what we have also the infrastructure, as I mentioned. We have the capability, the skillful people in this area. So what we need? The only thing we need a little bit of public relations and security, of course. We cannot force any tourist to come to Egypt just to risk his life. This is, I like to address to any Egyptians who really crazy and make all these troubles. Why hurting your country?
Well, do you consider them Egyptians making troubles and killing others and killing the other Egyptians?
Unfortunately, like everybody.
Do they have allegiance to Egypt?
Everybody play with this. Anyhow, so we go back to what we're saying. Unemployment, controlling unemployment is really a very important job to this government. They have to work very hard for it. Tourism, if I am in their place, I will really focus on tourism first, but I will focus as well on industry, on agriculture, and all the other areas. And at that time, we have to create jobs.
Yes.
We should not worry very much about the minimum wages, and no, we have to create first jobs, okay? And the unemployment rate is very high right now. And unfortunately...
It became worse, actually, the last 3 years.
And it affects the political picture.
Yes.
Because all these people who does not have a work, have a lot of energy, they go and they play politics.
Yeah. They play politics, or some young ones can be deceived and also lured by some little money in order to kind of do some acts, make some acts that are not really acceptable, crimes like. Well, you know, this is, you know, the issue about the central bank governor and talking about returning took out $2 billion that the Gulf state had deposited with Egypt Central Bank after negotiations to convert the funds into 3-year bonds broke down. Could you please explain to us the whole situation, you know, and then the interest rate that was put on in it? Is it high, residual, reasonable, and why this all took place?
It's very simple. I mean, this is like you would deposit money in the bank at a specific interest rate, and you want that money back. And that's basically the situation at this point. Now, what is the political reasons behind it? But again, I'm not going to go into...
But Hisham Raz, the governor, central bank governor, Hisham Raz, according to him, you know, whether, you know, like there is a political reason, you know, the decision that was taken economically.
Exactly, that's the point.
Yes.
Regardless of whatever
any political situation.
Let's look at it as a business transaction,
Definitely.
and they have every right to want their money back. And you know, I'm glad that we were able and capable to pay that money back. And it's a very simple transaction. People are reading into it a little bit more than they should, just simply because the word Qatar comes out.
Yeah.
But honestly, again, you know, thank them regardless. We thank them for you know, helping us out when we did need that money at this point. But I believe we really need to focus on how we increase our own revenue, really start looking at productivity, rather than looking at borrowing money at this point. This is what we have to be focused on, and it is very possible. We were talking about tourism. Tourism is one of the things that can be jump-started within a week's time, if the condition of security is achieved. But I need just to add something to what Doc was saying. It is not as simple as just security, because we have the infrastructure, and that is the increase of tourism that we're looking at maybe, you know, $50 billion worth of revenue annually. Egypt is very unique. The tourism sector in Egypt is extremely unique than any other place in the world because of the diversification and that deep history that you have.
Yes.
I mean, just the religious tourism that you can have. I'm not going to mention about ancient Egypt and so on and so forth, but here we need to diversify even on that. We need to diversify on medical tourism. We need to diversify on business tourism. We're not a business tourist place. I mean, you get stuck in Cairo traffic.
Yes.
It really hinders your whole touristic experience. Another thing is that we need to manage our tourism sector in a much better manner, because in all honesty, even before 2011, when it was booming to some extent, it was still lacking. It was still lacking a lot of infrastructure. It was lacking a lot of training. It was lacking a lot of quality. We are considered to be a cheap destination, not a high-end value destination. We